Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Red Shadow's Favorite Games. I am the Red Shadow, and tonight we're talking about what is definitely my favorite Nintendo 64 game of all time, and also a game that would quite possibly be in my top 5, or at least my top 10 games of all time. And that is The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Normally I'd be holding up an actual copy of the game, but this is a game that I don't actually own for the N64 in a cartridge that I can sit and put in my N64 and play. But what I do have are a couple of different versions of it, including this, which is a Japanese copy of Ocarina of Time. This is something I picked up a couple years ago, and for a really good price, or at least what I thought was a really good price, for a complete copy. I'm not going to open it up because I'm going to tell a sad tale here in a moment. But everything's in there, the cartridge, the plastic piece that holds it in there, all the paperwork and whatnot. This normally sits on top of my shelves with a bunch of my other kind of like special games. I really love the artwork. I think the Japanese and PAL versions of both Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, their cases look so much better than the cases that we get. And since this was cheap, this was going to be the beginning of my collection of those versions. But normally it sits up there with all the special games, and when I recently had the window project done in my house, I was moving my shelves out of the way, and because this is just a little cardboard box sitting up on the top, it fell off that shelf, not once but twice. It caused, I'm not sure how well it's going to come through here, but there's a little tear there that wasn't there before. A lot of these little nicked corners weren't like that before. The fold and the flap down here on the bottom popped open at least once. I was like, there must just be some sort of gaming god out there that hates me, because this is like a very prized part of my collection, and gravity has just totally, tried to destroy it on a couple different occasions. So there's that, and then there's my GameCube game here. This is the Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition, and what this is, if you don't know, probably be hard to see here on the back of the case. But what this has is the original Legend of Zelda, Zelda 2: The Adventures of Link, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, and a playable demo of Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker before that game came out. And it's all on the one little GameCube disc here. I don't have the booklet that came with this, if it came with one. I'm pretty sure it did, though, because I saw listings on eBay that said that they had something. This has been my go-to version for playing Ocarina of Time. On the GameCube, with the GameCube controller. Looks good. I mean, I'm sure it would look just as well as the N64 would. But I play my GameCube games through my Wii, and I do have the Wii hooked up through a component-style cable, I believe. But anyway, I haven't had any issues when playing Ocarina of Time on that. I'll show off two of my strategy guides. I think I'm missing one. I think there's another one somewhere in the house. But this is my Prima strategy guide for Ocarina of Time, which has the golden color that the American version of Ocarina of Time's case and cartridge were in. And this is my Versus Books Collector's Edition Ocarina of Time. I've mentioned before how much I love Versus Books, so I was really stoked to get the Ocarina of Time strategy guide of that. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about my history with Zelda and its Ocarina of Time's place in my favorite games. Back when I was a kid, at the time, or right around the time that the original Zelda came out, I lived in Butte, Montana, and I was going to this little Christian school, and we were doing fundraising, and we were selling candy bars door to door. And I told my friend Rich, I said, well, I didn't tell him what I was thinking. What I was thinking was, God, I really hate this kind of crap of having to go door to door and dealing with people who are going to slam the door or yell at us, regardless of the fact that we're kids. So I told Rich, I said, hey, I know some people who might be interested in buying some candy bars. Let's go over to their house. We can maybe have at least one friendly face. It was this guy named Russell, and he at that time I'd say he was probably like in his 40s. He lived at home with his mom, took care of his mom, whose name was Catherine. She was on an age and health issues and whatnot. And we had been neighbors of theirs at a different place in the same town a year or two before, but they had moved to a new place, and I thought, let's go over there and see if they want to spend $1 on a candy bar. Well, Russell answers the door, but he was kind of absent-mindedly answering it. He didn't even hardly acknowledge the fact that we were there. Why? Because he had a Nintendo Entertainment System hooked up to his TV, and he was playing the original Legend of Zelda. Years later, I would understand why that was such an important thing. Now, at that point, I hadn't really ever seen an NES or any of the games for it, so I was enraptured by it as well, but I was just like blown away. I was like, this is kind of a cool looking video game. I was used to Atari at this point. So my friend and I, Rich and I, we sat there for 20 to 30 minutes watching the game, but eventually also feeling the level of awkwardness rise as nobody was really saying anything. And eventually, Rich and I just kind of got up and said we were going to leave, and we left, and I don't think we even offered our candy bars. But that was my first experience with Zelda, and I was intrigued, to say the least. Now, I never had a Nintendo Entertainment System, so as far as Zelda and Zelda 2 were concerned, I had no further experience with those, with the first game for years and years and years to come. Eventually down the road, I actually did own a Super Nintendo, and to me, A Link to the Past is one of the greatest games out there as well. It's probably, as far as Zelda games are concerned, number 2 behind Ocarina of Time for me. So then fast forward a little bit to the days of the N64. I got an N64, I want to say it was in 1998, which I think it was the end of 1998 when Ocarina of Time came out. And I was reading the magazines and seeing the previews for Ocarina of Time. We're talking about big articles and advertisements everywhere. You know, this was a big deal. This game was going to be amazing, which it was. But I remember now looking back on it, thinking to myself, I'm kind of an idiot. But I didn't understand advertisements in those days. I guess I probably, even into my 20s, I took advertisements at face value. Which now I realize that, you know, you can't buy into anything that's in an advertisement. But there was an advertisement in probably EGM or GamePro, one of those magazines that covered all consoles at the time. Because I wasn't a Nintendo Power reader, I read either PlayStation focused magazines or all around console magazines. And I remember flipping through one and opening up this 2 and maybe even a couple of page ads about Ocarina of Time. And I'm reading all this stuff, and it read out sort of like a testimonial kind of thing. It had all these different little, I think it was from the point of view of NPCs in the game. And they were like, oh, you know, the Hyrule Castle is so big and amazing. Oh, and the princess is so pretty. It's so sad what happened to her. Da 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 da. All this crazy stuff. And I remember reading part of the advertisement, and it said to cross the game world map of Ocarina of Time would literally take you days. Now, what my mind thought was I could literally, with a controller in hand, start at one point on the map and travel all the way across to the farthest reaches the other side of the map. And it would literally take me in real world time 24, 48, 72 hours to traverse the size of the map. You know, my mind was blown. I thought, oh my god, this is the biggest game ever. And seeing screenshots of it being a 3D world instead of the 2D sprite world that the previous games had been, I was like, I buy it. I totally buy into this. Well, needless to say, I mean, I got the game and I was blown away by it, but I was always disappointed because, you know, you run across the map, especially when you have the horse Epona. Hopefully I'm pronouncing it right. But once you have the horse, I mean, it literally just takes you a handful of real-world minutes to do it. But what the advertisement was saying, that either it misworded it or misled me, or I was just stupid and ignorant and didn't pick up on it, but they were talking about in-game time. The game has actual sunrise, sunset, you know, day-night cycle, and to run from one far end of the map to the other would take you a couple of in-game days to do. It was like a crash course for me into the truth, or the not so much truth in advertising, and how you have to sometimes think of things outside of normal parameters. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, to be honest. It was just a little story I like to share when it comes to Ocarina of Time. What I love about the game was I was so enthralled with 3D gaming worlds back in the 90s. I've mentioned before, like with Grand Theft Auto, like the early Grand Theft Auto games like 3 and Vice City, or all the way back to stuff like Twisted Metal, or even a game like Driver and Driver 2. These were games that gave you big open worlds that you could travel around in, and Legend of Zelda was one of the first ones that I got to experience in gaming. So that sticks with me. But of course, then there's all of the, Legend of Zelda characters, all the music, the towns, the recurring themes that pop up in all of the Zelda games. It just took me right back into that world that I fell in love with Link to the Past, and just put me firmly right in it, where I could literally, by moving the camera, I could look around and see I'm in this world. And all of those fun little hidden type things in Zeldas, like the gold Skulltulas, and you'll hear the sound of them before you see them, and you gotta scan the environment to find them, which was just awesome. All the different temples were awesome. The music, Zelda music, just blows me away. I should have grabbed them. I just now thought of a couple of CDs for Zelda music that I have that may or may not just be like Asian bootlegs, but they were really cheap. I got them on eBay. I should have grabbed those, but I'll show them in another video at some point. But Zelda music is just, it's up there, not quite to the level of like Final Fantasy music for me, but it's a competitor for sure. I don't know, that's just Ocarina of Time in a nutshell. Just perfect transition to the 3D gaming world for the Zelda franchise. I still think that it holds up to this day. I've seen this debate before. Would Ocarina of Time stand the test of time when compared to today's games? Well, in a lot of ways, no, not even close. But I sure wish that there were more games like Ocarina of Time today that were simple and I guess that's maybe not the right word, but like wholesome, just something that you could sit down as an adult or as a kid and explore a big vast world, and it not be so overwhelming with so many like button combinations, like you gotta have all these different buttons on here to do so much stuff. Just make it basic, make it simple, and make it immersive like a Zelda game and like Ocarina of Time. I'd be so happy to find more games like that. This is one of those games that for me, I'm always like, does this game play like Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time style? If a game plays like that, if it feels like that, I jump into it. One game that gets compared to it a lot is Okami, which I don't see the comparisons quite as much, but it could be because the visual style, like the art style of the visuals of Okami are so different. But so anyway, that's about all I really have to say about Ocarina of Time. I do want to mention, a lot of people would say, well, what about Majora's Mask? That was an N64 game. It came out shortly after Ocarina of Time came out. A lot of people seem to really love it. I've never played it, because sadly to say, I've never beat Ocarina of Time. It's another one on this list of favorite games that I haven't been able to tick off that I've completed it. I've made it to the Shadow Temple, I believe it was, and I get messed up in that temple, way more so than the Water Temple, by far. But Majora's Mask is a game I really want to check out. Of course, I have it on this. I hope to get, the Japanese and PAL versions of Majora's Mask, as well as, the NTSC versions that we got here in the U.S. of both games. One of these days, when I complete Ocarina of Time, I'll go to Majora's Mask and give that a shot. And then I've got Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword all waiting on me. I've got A Link Between Worlds. I got a lot of Zelda in my future. I just need to make it the near future and not the far distant future. So anyway, that's going to wrap it up for this one. Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, for sure in my top 10 games, quite possibly in my top 5. It's an amazing game. If you don't know about Legend of Zelda at this point, you're either too young or living under a rock. So get out there and check it out. It's definitely one of the biggest franchises in gaming, and always will be. And always holds a special place in my heart. It's pretty much what made me love the N64 so much. There's a lot of other great N64 games, but my love, my esteem for that console and why I hold it up so high is really built off the back of Ocarina of Time. So that says a lot. So anyway, thanks a lot for checking this out. I'll have another video up very soon after this. We're getting close to the end, guys. I'm saving my absolute favorite game for my last video in the series, so look forward to that, and I'll see you in the next video.